Wycombe Wanderers Show.
Welcome along to Season 2, Episode 6, the point of the previous season where we stopped counting the episodes.
But I don't get the impression that you're going to do that this time. I think you're like an England batsman.
I think it's
you're pleased to have got 6 runs and you're looking to get 7.
I think I literally just forgot last time, but now it's more in my head.
Yeah, so when you then started again, did you have to go back and count all of the episodes? So once we got to sort of like 23, because you did start counting again.
I think Luke told me.
Okay.
Is that cheating?
No, that's okay. That was very honest of you, actually. I thought you'd say, oh, yes, you'd put in a lot of work. Welcome along. You can tell that there wasn't a game on Saturday, because, yes, we're here for the next hour. We'll talk any old rubbish, and some serious bits as well.
Absolutely. Got a game to look forward to, though.
Indeed, we have.
Oxford.
Yes, indeed. I always think with Wycombe, we don't have that big sort of derby game, but we have lots of little ones, and Oxford definitely falls into that category, along with, I think, MK Dons, Colchester, obviously, Peterborough these days. Possibly,
I'm sure somebody told me
even
once.
Luton as well.
I'm sure somebody told me once, I don't know if this is true, but our nearest league club is Brentford.
It's Brentford, yes. Yeah, no, I've heard that. Whereas I don't really think of that as if we were playing Brentford. Obviously, Slough Town, for older listeners, it's the big one. But Oxford is definitely up there for me. It'd be nice to get one over on them on Saturday.
We'll hear from manager Gareth Ainsworth to preview that and find out what he's been doing on his weekend off.
We will be talking to the manager of Wycombe Wanderers Women, Dave Ward, ahead of their new season. And
we'll be hearing from another David McCracken, former defender who signed from Dundee United. I remember it well.
Oh, yes. Yes, he's done well in the Scottish game, I see, as well.
Absolutely, yes. So we're finding out more about that and looking out for other successes of former players in free. I didn't know where that was going, to be honest. I thought, yes, and what else are we doing?
It's going well so far. We'll be reviewing some of the international games that we've been playing. We'll bring you some of the news as well, such as the fact that the Ipswich game has been rearranged for the 2nd of November. There you are. I've already brought you that news now. 7:45pm kickoff.
Listen up for that news again later
Indeed, yes. It will be coming up.
You don't win anything, but it will be quite fun. So yes, lots to look forward to in this hour of episode 6 of the Wycombe Wanderers Show. But first, some sad news this week.
Earlier on this week, we had the news that Wycombe legend Glenn Creaser suffered a cardiac arrest at half-time in a benefit match that he was attending at Stevenage. Joining us to tell us more is JDT. Lovely to have you with us, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, actually, he wasn't only attending, he was actually playing.
Ah, wow. Okay, I wasn't sure about that, because it wasn't made very clear that actually whether or not he was playing, and I did wonder.
Which he shouldn't have been, having previously suffered a heart attack. But that sums up Glenn, really. Yeah. Typical man who is there for everybody. But it was a strange way we learned about it, the Ex-Players Association. We had a meeting on Monday morning, which Pete Kewig was coming to, and I couldn't attend, and I phoned and left a message with Glenn to say, you're the only man on the committee modern enough to have a phone that can FaceTime. Can you take it with you so I can hear what's going on? And I got a reply fairly shortly saying no. And I thought, and I just sent another back, why? And he said, because I'm in hospital. And I said, why? And he said, because I had a heart attack and died. And I thought, God, that's taken it a little bit far. But anyway, obviously, we then had a further discussion. He did have a heart attack, and he was so lucky that he was at a ground where they had a defibrillator, and they had a very switched-on doctor who attended him straight away. And the serious side of it was that his heart did stop 4 times, but they got it going again at the expense of 14 broken ribs. Can you believe that? And then, of course, he was taken to Stevenage Hospital, and they worked on him straight away, and in fact, at the same time, put in 3 stents, which suggested he would have had a heart attack at some stage, but if you can be lucky in that way, it was lucky that he was at the place where there was a defibrillator. So Glenn's luck, for once, was in luck.
I mean, just as it did watching that Denmark against Finland game during the Euros, I've got goosebumps just listening to what you're saying, and you just, as you rightly say, you completely appreciate the fact that actually this happened where it did, in a football stadium where there were doctors and where there were defibrillators. Just an incredible story.
It is,
and as you say, very,
it is
very
amazing. And in fact, leading on from that, we've talked to Wycombe Wanderers to see whether they have them in place. We think there is one at Adams Park, but we want to help get some in places where perhaps they're not, because it is absolutely vital, and not just for big pro clubs, but for little clubs around everywhere. I mean, there's some terrible stories this last week about 6-year-olds just suddenly dropping like a stone, and coming out afterwards and saying, if there had been a defibrillator there, they could have been saved. So, we might be able to do something good actually coming from this.
And obviously we wish Glenn all the best in such a speedy recovery. And as you well know, he was our first guest from our ex-players on our first show, or our first ex-players feature that we spoke to. And so brilliant to hear about some of the battles that he's had, both with injury and on the pitch as well. So hopefully that will help in his recovery.
Well, I've been in contact with him because he's using his modern phone, and he tells me that he's hopefully going home almost immediately, which, when you consider, the thing only happened on Sunday, is absolutely quite remarkable. He may have to go back in for a pacemaker, and as we suggested to him, well, that might speed him up a bit, because he wasn't the fastest thing on earth. But of course, as he would say, well, he didn't have to be. He played centre half, and as you rightly said, he told his story so well on the very first programme. I mean, he was a key man for Martin O'Neill, and he was so much appreciated by his fellow pros that when they went to Wembley for the second FA Trophy in 1994, he'd already had his confrontation at John Lewis with a forklift truck, which most other people would have meant he probably would have lost his foot. I mean, that's how serious it was. But within 10 months, he was back playing. He wasn't available for the trophy, the second trophy game, but the team insisted that he was the man that went up and collected the cup. And of course, they won promotion that season. And again, he was only able to play a couple of games that season, but again held in such high regard by Martin that he kept him on, even for the second season. And although, he was never the same Glenn, he still played 15 or so games in the old second division, which for a 32-year-old guy who thought his career was ending when he came to Wycombe is quite remarkable.
And he was such a great leader, and obviously a huge fan favourite as well.
He's just an inspirational kind of character, and that's why we wanted him on the ex-players committee, because his nickname, as you know, and most people know, when he played, was the Enforcer, and that's what he did. Everybody around him had to do what he said, and we thought if we got him on the committee, he could then ring up all the odd bods and say, "Oi, why aren't you? Why haven't you signed up for the Ex-Players Association? Or come round there and sort you out, mate." And so we've had people, and people from some distance away, but ex-colleagues, Dennis Green, Tim Langford, Kim Casey, who don't live anywhere near here, who've joined up because of Glenn, and so he's still got a role at Wycombe Wanderers. And I know Martin, I tried to get hold of Martin today to give him the news, and I know when Martin hears it, he will be distraught, because he was the guy that led his team on the field.
He's also, Glenn Creaser, if you'd asked me of all the people that we've interviewed on the programme, which one would go along to a benefit match and still play even though he wasn't meant to, I would have said to you, I think that was probably Crease.
Absolutely. And, this was a side that, and a player he played with in the early 1980s. I'm not sure he's even seen that person in the intervening years, but he's that kind of guy. And we get lots of requests, can we raise a team? And the two we turn to for that are Glenn and Rhino, Keith Ryan. And he always comes up trumps because he enforces it.
Well, obviously do wish him all the best from us when you speak to him as well. And wish him a really speedy recovery. And hopefully he'll be back on his feet very soon.
Smashing. I will do. I will pass on your kind regards and from all your listeners as well.
Indeed. And thank you as well, JDT, to you for all that you do and all of the interviews that you've arranged on the Wycombe Wanderers Show. We are very grateful for your continued support.
We love it. The more the better. I'm sure the listenership is mounting every week, even if it's just people that you've interviewed.
Brilliant to speak to you. Thank you so much, Steve, for your time.
Okay, mate. Thanks very much indeed. You take care.
That's John D. Taylor, who is the Vice Chairman of the Wycombe Wanderers Ex-Players Association.
Yes, obviously we all wish Glenn Creaser a speedy recovery, and hopefully he'll be, as I say, back on his feet very soon. Yeah, indeed. And just amazing that he's then coming home so quickly after the event, and it just makes you realise how important defibrillators are, and I think we would be completely behind any campaign either that the club or the Ex-Players Association are planning to launch with regards to actually getting more defibrillators into sports grounds and just generally in society, because I know that you and I both struggle when we come up the stairs here at Wycombe Sound, let alone actually playing 90 minutes of football. Definitely. Still to come on this week's Wycombe Wanderers Show, we'll be chatting live to former defender David McCracken. As mentioned a little earlier on, we heard from Dave Ward, who's the manager of Wycombe Wanderers Women, and Gareth Ainsworth. We'll be hearing from him as well ahead of the game against Oxford this weekend. But first, as mentioned, there has been an international break. There has. Never very keen on the international break because it always seems to go on for ages. Although I quite like the fact now that actually in international breaks there are 3 games. Yes. Which, so it makes it a little bit more interesting. Also, let's now have the Anis Mehmeti apology section, because Anis Mehmeti apologised this week for his sending off against Sunderland. And also I must apologise because last week I was making out that he was with the full Albanian squad, but actually that was a lie. Oh. He's with the under-21 Albanian squad. How very misleading. Sorry, Anis, about that. But yes, also he apologised for getting into that, what you might call, altercation with Luke O'Nien at the Stadium of Light. I wonder if you knew that actually that Luke O'Nien was a former Chairboy. Probably not. Perhaps that's what started it. Well, maybe, yes. Yes, Luke was saying, I'm more popular with the fans than you, and, and it was like, ugh. Allegedly. Yes, well, whatever happened. But yes, so Anis has been playing for Albania. TJ DeBar, of course, scored a goal for Gibraltar, although I think we covered that last week, didn't we? And then he was strangely absent from their game against Norway, where it's difficult with Gibraltar, because you want to say, like, where they lost 5-1, and clearly that is true, but at the same time, that seems to be doing them a slight disservice, considering that there's only 29,000 people in Gibraltar. So it will be a bit like Norway playing Flackwell Heath and Marlow. And really, you need to celebrate the fact that they scored 1. And ignore the fact that the other team scored 5. So in Gibraltar's doing rather well against Norway, where they lost 5-1. But TJ wasn't even on the bench. So I will be finding out. I don't know how much Gareth will tell me about that later on, but I will be finding out where TJ was. And Daryl Horgan also, of course, he appeared for the Republic of Ireland the other day in their draw with Serbia, came on as a substitute. There is something really nice, isn't there, about the fact that you wouldn't have thought normally that you'd be affected by an international break in League One, but fantastic that, yes, in a way, that the game against Ipswich had to be postponed because of that very commitment. And slightly amazing that only 3 games went ahead in League One, and you do think, goodness me, is League One now going to be such that actually in future we're just going to have the international break off as well? Because we might as well, if only 6 teams are, have their game going ahead, that it doesn't seem much point in actually arranging those games. And we have already rearranged, as we said, that Ipswich game, so that's going to be the 2nd of November. We can mention that throughout the show. Shall we keep mentioning that as well? Well, and also I noticed as well that all of the international breaks are Wycombe home games, so we might have quite a lot of evening matches coming up. Yes. Which is good in a way, isn't it? There's something quite nice about being under the lights and...
Oh, yes, yeah. I mean, I always prefer it as a fan. I think it's more exciting going along on a... I love going on a Saturday afternoon. Of
course.
It gives you something to look forward to. I think it almost goes back to that being at school thing. If you were playing on a Tuesday night, if your team was playing on a Tuesday night, it gave you something to look forward to sort of like on the Monday, when you were going back thinking, I don't really want to go back to school. But at least you had Tuesday football to look forward to. So I've always kept that, as I like Tuesday night football. At the same time, I think the club would probably much rather that a game, say, against Ipswich was going ahead on the Saturday, just because of the amount of fans that probably our friends from Suffolk would have bought on a Saturday. Probably won't be quite as many on a Tuesday night.
But another opportunity to use the flashing floodlights as well.
Indeed, that is true, yes. Although I was slightly disappointed, I might have mentioned this again last week, that they did use the flashing floodlights after the defeat to Aston Villa, and I did leave the ground thinking, no, that's only to be done if we've won.
Mood lighting.
Looks a bit naff if we've lost.
Discussing mood lighting on the day. Yes, if a defeat, you want something low light to take you.
You do, yes. I mean, I'm not quite sure how you could get the lights to maybe do that sort of flashing thing in a slightly sort of like depressed way. I don't think that would quite work. So no, just can we have the lights doing their stuff when we've won? Can
we feature more lighting issues on previous programmes as well? On future programmes, not previous programmes. We can't do that.
Retrospective lighting. We'll get a special guest on for you.
That'd be great.
It'll be a bit like mid-mornings. Which Colin and I also do, actually. If you want more of this nonsense, you can hear it every weekday morning on Wycombe Sound between 10 and 1, although it's not both of us.
No, we don't do it together.
Yeah.
We describe ourselves as co-hosts, but not.
Yes, but we never actually meet.
No, not in that co-hosting sort of way. But we clearly do this together. Talking of guests coming up in the future, very pleased to report that we'll be hearing from David McCracken in a few moments' time here at Wycombe Sound.
Well, you say that we're doing it together, but you're about to go now, aren't you?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, because Colin's got an appointment that he couldn't get out of, so I'm actually doing the rest of the show on my own.
Bye.
Online, on Radio Player, and on 106.6 FM. This is Wycombe Sound.
It is the Wycombe Wanderers Show. Not quite sure actually where Colin's gone. I need to think he works for MI5 or something like that, because it's a bit strange that he's disappeared at this time on a Thursday night. But there you go. So it's just me now, Bob, here with you on the Wycombe Wanderers Show. But I'm delighted to say that almost in a co-host role now for the next 20 minutes, I'm joined by former player David McCracken. Good evening, David. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good evening, Bob. Thanks, and it's great to be on.
Fantastic. Well, really, really good to have you with us. So take us back, because it was 2007 when you joined Wycombe Wanderers, but before that you had a very successful career playing for Dundee United, where you even appeared in the UEFA Cup. So tell us what took you from the top flight of Scottish football to come and play for a little club in South Buckinghamshire.
Yeah, well, it's looking back, I'd been at Dundee United since I left school, done my apprenticeship there for a couple of years, and started my professional career there. I was then there for another 9 years or so, but during that time, being at the same club for so long, my career had kind of stalled slightly. My progression as a player had stalled as well, playing in the same league against the same players or similar players at different clubs, wasn't helping progress me as a player. So at the time, there was a new manager brought in, Craig Levine, along with his assistant Peter Houston, who, at that point, the club weren't in a great shape. We were kind of mid-table and kind of started to tail away slightly during the season, but at that point he didn't want to make any decisions on contracts or that, but we kind of came to a kind of amicable agreement that it was probably the best time for me to leave the club and try and get a new challenge, and that's where Wycombe came up. Spoke to the manager at the time, Paul Lambert. He looked to get me on loan in the January, which unfortunately fell through, but followed that up by signing in the summer, which was great news for me.
Interesting that you say as well about that maybe it got a bit stale at Dundee United. I've always wondered this about Scottish football, that actually the fact that you play league games and you play the same team 4 times in a season, does it get a bit like looking at the fixture list and thinking, oh goodness me, we've got to go all the way to Aberdeen, or we've got to go down to St Mirren again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it can be. You can actually end up playing teams up to 5 or 6 times if you meet them in the cup competitions as well. So, sometimes it does get repetitive, and if similar to myself, if there's players who are coming through the youth ranks and playing there for 4, 5, 6 years, consistently, then you're going to be coming up against the same players again. So, I was getting to a period where I was playing against the same players. Some games I was doing fantastic because I knew I would play well against certain players. Then other games, I was having a nightmare because there were certain players that I found hard to play against. So that kind of inconsistency in my game wasn't helping me any. So, I had to get a change, had to try something different, yeah.
So when Paul Lambert got in touch and said, do you fancy coming down to Wycombe, did you know very much about us before that?
I'll be absolutely honest, I knew nothing about Wycombe at that point. Only the fact that Paul was there. I'd obviously kind of followed that and seen some of that in the kind of press, but at the time didn't know anything about the club, where it was based, etc. But the fact that when Paul got in touch, having played against him when he was at Celtic, for me it was a big deal, him getting in contact because he had played against me, he had seen me, so there was already a massive respect for Paul there at that point. So it was definitely something that I wanted to pursue.
And so, very much, it sounds like it was about Paul Lambert. So, when you then arrived in High Wycombe, what were your thoughts? What were your impressions of the club?
Well, you mentioned it in the kind of opening comments there that I was leaving the top league in Scotland to go to a League Two in England, to a smaller club, so to speak. But that day that I came down to see the club, I was absolutely overawed. I couldn't believe the setup that the club had. Own training facilities, with gym facilities inside, a couple of physios. There was a chef. Just the whole kind of setup, and then obviously the stadium as well. At the time was great. Seemed very, very homely. A very kind of close knit club. But yeah, it was miles ahead in terms of even Dundee United, where I was at the time, where we were possibly using 2 or 3 different facilities over the course of the same month. Using junior pitches or sometimes having a training facility, but it wasn't at the stadium. It wasn't ours. We were getting changed at the stadium and then having to go to a different training facility. So, that already for me was a step up from where I was at.
And what are your memories of that first season that you were with Wycombe when we just qualified for the playoffs, or in fact qualified fairly impressively actually? So we finished 7th, but we were 9 points clear of Chesterfield in 8th.
Yeah, that's right. We had a very strong end to the season in terms of getting into the playoffs and that. It was great for me, as I said. It changed me. I was coming up against a different type of players. It also changed me in the sense of, with Paul making me club captain, it added an extra sense of responsibility to my game and, me as a person. It wasn't just myself that I had to think about. I now had to think of, the players around me, different players in the squad, whether they were playing or they weren't involved, if they were injured. Then also having that contact, being that kind of go-between between the management, the coaching staff, and the players, trying to put those views and points across both ways, that was going to kind of benefit everyone in the whole. So that was great for me. It changed, it changed me as a person and probably made me mature, to be honest. I was probably, and always have been, a bit of a kind of happy-go-lucky guy that likes to have a laugh at himself and, make others laugh around about him. But at that point, in terms of my career, I felt as though I had to change. So, over the course of the season that happened. But yeah, it was unfortunate at the end of that year that, I think we got put out off Stockport. Yeah. And, it was a tough end to the season because for me personally, it just felt as though, it was going to happen. It was just a natural progression that we were going to go through the playoffs. Because we were in such a decent run of form, get into the playoffs. But yeah, it was a bit of a shock once it just came to a kind of abrupt end when we get beat at Stockport.
Yeah, and I mean, that must be quite difficult as well, that actually then the season just comes to a stop and that's it. It must, you haven't got then the game on Saturday or Tuesday to actually sort of bounce back.
Yeah, of course, and ultimately, as much as you don't want to, you end up still watching and seeing how Stockport got on, or what happens in the games after that. So that's even worse, and that kind of tears you up a bit because you're not involved in it. But even leading from that and into that summer, there was obviously a big change for the club at the time as well. After Paul took the decision to leave in that summer.
When you were captain, I mean, you had some great characters in that side as well. Sergio Torres was there, Matt Bloomfield, who of course is still with Wycombe now. You were even, Neil Lennon in his very short Wycombe career was in that side as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, at the time, as I mentioned, being made club captain, and you have these big characters run about you, even including the likes of Jermaine Easter, Mike Williamson, Russell Martin, who were slightly younger at the time, but as you say, Neil Lennon came down, and the experience that he's had and the career that he's had behind him, and to be honest, I seen it as opportunities to learn, to kind of learn different experiences and constantly asking questions for different situations, which I felt benefited myself. But it just showed, I think, the calibre of player that the club was able to attract at that point as well, which was great for the club.
Yeah, really, really impressive. And so then, what about the second season? How was that?
Yeah, so as I said, that summer of change when Paul left, I think there was a number of us just, and I admit at the time we didn't know the ins and outs of why he left or his decisions, but I think a few of us that he had signed, we felt it was kind of personal to us as well, because we'd signed due to him being the manager. But as football does, football moves on, and Peter Taylor came in and very quickly, he made contact with myself and wanted to have that conversation to see where I was at, where he felt, some of the squad were at, what had happened the previous year, and ultimately show and kind of tell me what his vision was for the next year. So again, that was again, that the excitement starts to come back again, because you understand the aspirations and the ambitions that he's got. He's coached and managed at a massive level, so why would you not want to try and have a taste of that? So again, it was a different structure for what we had from Paul, but at the same time, it was still on a high level and very, very structured. Peter done a lot of research into each team and each team we were coming up against, and that that showed in the team that he played and the way he structured the training sessions going into them at the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about it, it seems amazing now that actually we were able to attract somebody like Peter Taylor, who of course had been caretaker manager of England for a little while. He'd managed at Leicester City and taken the top of the Premier League for a short while. It seems amazing now that actually, he was prepared to come to League Two Wycombe.
Yeah, absolutely, and that, I would say, credit goes to the guys above. Ivan was chairman at the time, and obviously Steve Hayes as well. I'm pretty sure played a massive part in that as well. So credit to the guys of making that happen. But yeah, it was it started off pretty well. I think Peter brought a different kind of structure, and the players understood where they stood in terms of the squad, and that he made it quite open and clear that no matter how well you were playing or who you were in the squad or what part you played, you could have a run of games where you scored 2 or 3 goals, or you've had 2 or 3 clean sheets, or played the best game of your life. It doesn't matter whatever team we were coming up against, he was setting up a team to beat them basically, and that was it. There was no qualms about it. There was no favouritism or anything like that. It was just purely and utterly to beat the team that we were coming up against.
And you were very, very good at that as well, ending up finishing 3rd that season and getting promotion.
Yes, so that kind of structure, I think early on we didn't see how that was going to work, because the team didn't change much because we were doing so well, and I think we went something like maybe 18 or 19 games unbeaten, along with, I think at the time it was Liverpool, who were the only other team in Europe who were similar. And across that season we weren't kind of open open teams in terms of, you know, free scoring or that, but, you know, we're very hard to beat. I think with an incredible record of clean sheets that year, and that probably played a massive part in his getting promotion, you know, because at the end of the season we did, you know, definitely dip, our form did dip and questions were being asked, and there was a bit of pressure on us, to be fair, but, you know, fortunately we held out and managed to get that promotion, which was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the table, you realise actually how fortunate we were. We finished 78 points, so level with Bury, and basically got promoted by plus one goal better than Bury. So you can, you know, it must have been pretty nervy towards the end of the season in that dressing room.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that last game of the season was absolutely torture. You know, and you mentioned that plus one, I'm pretty sure, I'm trying to remember who it was that scored. Actually, I think it was myself. I'm not wanting to take credit of that, but no, as I said, you know, over the course of the season, we were a very tough team to beat, and to be, you know, to take that defeat at the end of the season, that last game of the season, when it was so crucial that we won, but at the same time, the waiting time after that game was torture, because our game had finished and Bury were still playing, so we were waiting on their result coming through, and, you know, we'd actually come off the pitch and there was probably a good, I think maybe 10 minutes or so.
Wow.
They're waiting to find out that result, and then, you know, obviously when it came through, it was absolute carnage, I would say, in the changing room, and that was crazy. Yeah.
And so then you decided to move on. So how did that come about? And was that a difficult decision to make, considering that actually the club had just got promotion?
Yes, it was. And, you know, looking back at the time, it was a personal choice for me. Looking at, you know, my aspirations of what I wanted to do when I came down to England, I'd kind of certain career points that I wanted to try and reach, and, you know, just at that point there was a couple of other clubs interested, and, you know, Steve Hayes, you know, I need to give him his credit. He done everything and anything that he could to try and keep me at the club, which, you know, I have massive respect for. But again, it wasn't about money. You know, everything that I took on in the kind of coming clubs was matched by Steve. So, you know, and as I say, I've got massive respect for that. But again, it was just a personal choice that I felt, you know, moving club and moving to MK Dons at the time was a better choice for me. But, you know, sometimes you look back in your career and say to yourself, well, was it the right choice? And, you know, Wycombe was such a great club, and unfortunately that year after, you know, the boys were relegated again. But again, it was just, as I said, it was a personal choice for myself.
I'm sure this doesn't come into it at all, but as fans, we probably looked at that move and thought, oh goodness me, you know, could you have gone anywhere else other than the MK Dons? But I'm sure as a player that doesn't come into it at all, does it?
No, I know, and that's, you know, you know, speaking to a number of fans that I was kind of quite close with at the time, you know, that was their take on it as well. You know, anybody else other than the MK Dons. But yeah, again, it was, you know, that's just the way it kind of worked out. As I said, there was other clubs interested, but, you know, it got to a point where those weren't viable options. So then it became MK Dons for the choice. Yeah.
And I know that then you went back to Scotland for a little while. Tell us what are you up to now with regards to football?
Yeah, so at the moment I've actually took a kind of slight break from football. So, you know, the past kind of 3 or 4 years, I went through my kind of, you know, obviously retired from playing, but went into the coaching through at Peterhead, then took on the manager's job at Falkirk, one of my previous clubs as well, which was great. You know, it was a great start out, and some great things went on at Falkirk. Unfortunately, you know, get let go at the end of last season, but, you know, it just kind of took a wee bit of time out. I'm now I've started my own property business, which, you know, has took a couple of months to get moving, but it's going great now, and I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it, and it's, you know, it's something away from football that I feel I can build over the next kind of 20 or so years, 20, 30 years, you know. But once football, an opportunity comes back, then, you know, I'm definitely going to get back into it. You know, it's just one of those things that it's in your blood and you want to be involved. But, you know, it's got to be the right thing.
Yeah, of course. I would imagine, say, if Dundee United came knocking and said, oh, do you fancy being the manager, you'd probably struggle to turn that down.
Of course, absolutely. You know, and it's opportunities like that, you know, you can't turn down. You know, and as I say, any opportunities that come up, you know, whether someone approaching me or me looking at it and thinking, right, you know, it's one that I want to try and get, then I'll absolutely be doing that. Yeah.
And so, when you look back on your time at Wycombe Wanderers, what are the main memories?
Well, for me, you know, it was, you know, from the get-go, I think it's a massive family club. You know, it's a very, very close club, and you know, it made me and my family at the time feel very, very welcome. You know, the boys in the changing room helped settle me quickly, and I think, you know, for me, that was obviously my first move in my career, so it was very strange for me. You know, normally I was the one that was a regular or someone in the changing room that was welcoming somebody in at Dundee United, but you know, roles had reversed there, so it was great to be in a position where the players that had been at Wycombe for a year or two or a couple of years, they were very welcoming, and that's what I can always remember, you know, for the players, to Mark, the chef at the time, to Steve Hayes, you know, right through to Jim Gardner, you know, and the kit guys and the guys in the office, everybody just wanted to do well for each other, and that's always what I'll be taking away from that. Mm-hmm. And
what do you think of the job that Gareth Ainsworth is doing with the club at the moment?
Oh, incredible. You know, the past couple of years have been absolutely amazing. You know, I still speak to Blooms now and again, and, you know, obviously spoke to him at the time of promotion into the Championship. That was outstanding. You know, that was absolutely amazing what Gareth and the boys had done. So, you know, here's hoping that this year there can be that similar bounce back effect, so to speak, because it was great for everybody, you know, looking from the outside in. You know, everybody involved with the club, it's just such a special thing, and I know that everybody involved in the club, you know, how hard they work to achieve those things, and, you know, that was very well deserved. So here's hoping, you know, this year's another successful year.
Well, it's been absolutely brilliant speaking to you and hearing you reminisce about your times at Adams Park. David McCracken, thank you very much for joining us on the Wycombe Wanderers Show this evening.
Thank you very much, Bob. It's been a pleasure.
Online, on Radio Player, and on 106.6 FM. This
Part 3, or extra time as we call it, on the Wycombe Wanderers Show. Bob here with you tonight. We're not quite sure where Colin has disappeared to. Many, many thanks to David McCracken for speaking to us. Really, really enjoyed that. Still to come on the programme, we will be hearing from the Chairboys boss, Gareth Ainsworth. If you think that football for the men's Wycombe Wanderers side has been disrupted over the last 18 months or so, we'll spare a thought for Wycombe Wanderers Women, who have had their season basically completely annulled for 2 seasons running. Finally, hopefully, fingers crossed, things are about to get going again. I'm delighted to say that joining us now is the manager of the Wycombe Wanderers women's side, Dave Ward. Hello, Dave.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us. So, yeah, I think it's fair to say you've had a rough couple of seasons, really.
Yeah, it's been quite a challenge, I have to say.
Yeah.
Filled with all sorts of highs and lows, really. When we look at the first season, where we were disrupted, we had managed to get through to a cup final, and that couldn't be played because of the first lockdown. And then last season we'd started very brightly, and then locked down again just after the middle of December. So consequently, yeah, it's been very stop-start. So yeah, looking forward to this season, and far more optimistic about having a full and complete season, which I think will benefit everyone.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it must be like as well to have those competitions annulled when you're then watching, so many other competitions actually continuing. But fingers crossed then for this season, you know, it is looking like, yeah, everything is going to go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we're looking forward to it. We've had a bit of a stop-start pre-season. We've had some interruptions due to COVID right at the beginning of pre-season in July, and clearly we've got players taking advantage of having some holidays, long weekends, having been locked down for so long. So, it has made things a little bit more stop-start than I would have normally have liked. But I think we have to give the players an opportunity to do what they need to do for their own well-being. Thankfully, we're all available for this coming Sunday's league opener. So absolutely delighted with the way things have gone so far.
Fantastic. For those who don't know, tell us whereabouts in the women's football pyramid Wycombe Wanderers Women play.
Well, we sit at the 5th tier. You've got the Women's Super League, followed by the Women's Championship, and then you come into the National League setup, and we are 1 tier below the National League setup. There's only one promotion spot per season from each of the regional leagues. So it makes it highly competitive, and it also means that you can't really afford to drop more than 1 or 2 points across the season if you're going to have any chance of gaining promotion.
Which I would imagine makes it almost a little bit like being in the Premier League, sort of like top 4 or 5, knowing that actually maybe you can only lose 1 game a season. That must make things quite tough, particularly for you as the manager.
Yes, it does, because you can't legislate for injuries, and you've got to hope that the strength of depth in the squad is good enough to cope with that. But it's all about how consistently a team can perform at the highest level at this level of football. And quite clearly, we're setting ourselves up to try and do that. Whether or not we do it this season, who knows? But our intention is always to go out and to win every game. And I think the squad of players that I've managed to pull together for this season are capable of doing that on their day.
So realistically, promotion is a possibility for this season. That's what you're going for.
I think it's a possibility, but what we can't disregard are the teams such as Moneyfields and Abingdon United in particular, who have been particularly strong rivals over the last 2 seasons. And I know Moneyfields feel a little bit hard done by it, not having successfully gained through the promotion pool National League status this season. Especially as there's a gap in the division above us, which would have allowed them to move into. But for whatever reason, the FA decided that wasn't going to happen. So we've got a very strong couple of contenders up against us. And we can't write off the other sides either, because it's quite clear from some of the early fixtures in the league, which took place last week, very close games, and some unknown quantities such as Abingdon Town and our opponents this Sunday, Eastleigh in the Community.
For those who don't know too much about the women's game, what's the difference in the setup, Dave, between the men's and women's Wycombe Wanderers sides?
There's a huge difference in terms of how we prepare. We don't have the opportunity to train every day. We only train once a week at the moment, but these are players that are playing primarily for the enjoyment of the sport. But ultimately, they're all winners and they want to play at the highest level they can. So it does become highly competitive. They're every bit as serious as any of their professional counterparts for that, I'm sure. And we do have some natural winners in there, and we've got some very talented female footballers.
I mean, again, it strikes me that actually that it must make your job quite difficult, though, because it very much you haven't got, in the way that, say, Gareth Ainsworth has, a contracted squad who you're looking after and you're seeing every day. And really interesting that you're even saying things with regards to pre-season, that actually you're sort of having to work around people's holidays and whatever, which Gareth Ainsworth is not having to worry about.
It doesn't have to worry in quite the same way. But again, these players are strictly amateurs, and they are doing it for the love of the sport, but also to try and, as I say, achieve the highest level that they can. And obviously, as you move up through the tiers, it becomes that bit more professional. There's more money involved. Players are on contracts. So therefore, it becomes a lot more akin to the men's semi-professional game.
Is one of the stated aims for the club actually to try and get promotion eventually to the National League?
Yes, and that's the whole reason for having restructured how the club is managed and run now. We've got very close links with the Supporters Trust Board, and in fact Nigel Kingston chairs our management board now. We've got Tony Hector on board. We've also got Bob Massey from the Trust Board. They're actually working with us very closely to ensure that the team is in or the club, from the female perspective, is in a strong, sustainable position moving forward. So we've got the right management arrangements behind the scenes, as well as having the right management and coaching arrangements in place for dealing with players. So what we've been able to do this season, which has been a lot of hard work, but it's been successfully achieved, is to resurrect a reserve team. We've taken on a new group of under-18s this season, and they had a very encouraging start of the weekend in their league opener with a 13-0 victory.
I was going to say, I did notice that was quite eye-opening. It was like, wow, goodness me, 13-0. That's not bad for your first game of the season.
And most of the young ladies that are playing in that team are 16 years of age, so they're 2 years young for that age group. So it was an incredible performance. And one that sets the bar very high for both the reserve team and for our first team. So whether or not we can win 13-0 on Sunday is debatable, but we'll certainly be having a good go to make sure that we get all 3 points.
And it must be wonderful as well to actually know that you've got those girls in your under-16 team will hopefully then come into the first team.
Yeah, there's no doubt that some of the talent in that new under-18 squad is exceptional. It's important for us in terms of how we develop those youngsters to ensure that they're capable of making the transition into senior female football. You know, the old adage still rings true that if they're good enough, they're old enough. Once they're 16, if they are good enough, they will get opportunities to play in either the reserves or the first team.
How do you find and source new players? Is it very much through things like trials?
What we did this year, we did quite a lot of publicity and advertising. To a large extent, that's been successful in helping me to bring some very good players into the squad. From last season's squad, I've lost 6 players, 2 who have had to retire through injury, unfortunately, 2 who are still on the injured list. In fact, our skipper, Charlotte Bagshaw, who is well known to the show, has just had her first cartilage operation, and she's waiting for that to be reassessed, because there's a doubt that her ACL is strong enough to play at the moment, so she may need a reconstruction on that as well, which would probably see her not play again this season. I've lost those 4 players. I've got 2 that have moved on to our big rivals, Abingdon United. Replacing the quality of those players has been quite a challenge for us. So far, we've done pretty well with the recruitment. So I've brought in some very good players. And in fact, I've pinched one back from Abingdon United, who I think is a very good young player in Taya McCalman, who's a very strong, competitive and technically gifted central midfielder. What
about our spectators this season? Because I know very much last season, or when you have been playing in the last couple of seasons, it has been that actually it's had to be behind closed doors like so many other football matches. What's the situation with that this season?
Well, the situation is that spectators are welcome. Again, what we're trying to do is to encourage people to maintain a bit of distance, because we don't know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't.
Course, yeah.
There is enough open space for people to come and watch the game quite comfortably. There's no entrance fee, so the more the merrier that get behind us, the better.
So that's a 2 p.m. kickoff this Sunday for Wycombe Wanderers Women against Eastleigh, and it's being played at the Bucks College Group's Wycombe campus in Flackwell Heath on Spring Lane. The postcode HP10 9HE, and Dave, goes without saying, as many people wearing those light and dark blue quarters as possible will be very welcome.
That would be absolutely wonderful. The players and the coaching staff and myself would really appreciate all the support that we can get. It's important for everyone to get behind us and to help the players through, to know that they're supported by the main body of the club. There is some very good football played at the level that we play at. What I would always ask is that people don't come along and try and compare it like for like with men's football, because it's different in terms of its physicality and its pace and its power. But in terms of the technical ability and the desire to compete and to win games, it's the same game. It's just played by women. It's a bit of a spectacle, and we have got some very talented players that I think might make a few people's jaws drop.
And thank you very much to Dave Ward, the manager of Wycombe Wanderers Women. And from the women to the men's team, earlier on today I went up to the training ground and spoke to Chairboys boss Gareth Ainsworth. So we've had the international break. Is that a welcome break, or does it actually get in the way of the momentum of the season?
No, it's a welcome break. You know, we actually wanted it, funnily enough. For the first time, Wycombe had 3 internationals, Anis, Darryl and TJ, obviously, and that enabled us to have the option to call the Ipswich game off. Now, with the injuries we had and with the squad stretched like it was, you know, we've never had so many contact injuries at the start of the season, and you know, the physios do a great job, but they can't help contacts, you know, and Nick and Jack Wakely and Taffazoli just coming back, and you know, McCarthy and Stuart. It was a good call, I think, to get these boys back for the games coming up, because they've got a hell of a schedule now with the League Cup success, and I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into it. But I needed probably that weekend off, although I didn't take it off. I was at Wimbledon, Oxford, just to regroup, and obviously training was important, get some more messages into the boys, new boys that have come in, but really looking forward to Oxford now, and you know, we want to keep on playing the way we're playing, because I thought we were good at Sunderland. Don't shout at the radio, people, because we were okay. It was both boxes that cost us, and I understand that, but we've been a lot worse at Sunderland in recent years, and that was definitely a step forward. So
I thought you were phenomenal in the first 15 minutes. I was sitting there thinking, goodness me, it looks like it's going to be 3 or 4-0.
Yeah, very similar to Oxford at Wimbledon last Saturday when I was there. Oxford really had some good chances, and if they'd have scored the first goal earlier, it could have been a different game, or a couple, you know. And I think we had a couple of chances that we just fell short of hitting the target or converting, and we've been working on that. But Sunderland obviously got the first goal, the fans were behind them, and you know what happens up there. But again, proud of the boys, really proud of the efforts, and I'm sure the fans who are up there would be saying the same. Well, we started really well, and if we'd have finished the game like that, which we actually did, you know, with David Wheeler and Bale playing well, I think the fans they've got a real balanced view on that. No longer are the fans coming home absolutely disgruntled and slagging everyone off, and they actually are little tweaks here and then, and how could we get maximum points this season, and that's great. That's great to hear, because we're close. We're not far off a real good challenging squad. I've had some great backing, as always, off the Currigs, and looking forward to seeing what we can do starting Saturday against Oxford.
How are the players that were on international duty? I noticed particularly TJ didn't play in the Gibraltar game against Norway.
Yeah, TJ, I think picked a yellow card up, actually. I think he might have been suspended for that one. He's okay. He'll have a little run out in a game, in a sort of a reserve trialist game. We'll give him a run out to get his legs going again. Darryl, I think, played a good amount of minutes for Ireland. Was on the pitch for both their equalisers in their games, so that's great moments for him. And Anis, a little bit gutted that Anis didn't get more minutes, because obviously he's a superstar in the under-21s at Albania, but I think they gave some younger boys a chance, and that really was disappointing for Anis. And obviously the double whammy with his ban as well, you know, which we totally accept. You know, you can't do what he did on the pitch, but obviously there was huge provocation, and we understand that as well. But we want to make sure that all those boys come back, they're ready to jump in the squad when needed, and Darryl especially has played a big part in the game so far, as has Anis, but he'll be unavailable now. So we're totally on that. The medical team looking after all the protocol they have to go through getting back in the country. We're not having any Brazil-Argentina situations, you know, so we're happy where we are, and as I said, the boys who were injured, McCarthy, Stewart, and they're all back now, and that's great for me to have a strong squad to select from for Saturday.
And so Oxford United, it's not quite Blackburn against Burnley, but it's pretty feisty. Our friends up the M40, not least because of obviously the last time we played them was in the playoff final.
Yeah, and now you mention Blackburn Burnley, please do not ever dismiss anyone. I know you haven't, but anyone listening, don't dismiss that derby. That is a hell of a derby up there, you know, and people don't realise how far that one goes back. I've been some cracking games in that one, and as you say, this one geographically we can't help where we are. Oxford can't help where they are. All right, we don't go back to the early 1900s with our derby, and our Oxford had their own rivals, we have our own rivals, but this is the M40 derby. This is two close proximity teams with a little bit of history as well, and I love it. I think that's football. You know, if we had to travel 2 hours every time to play, and it was, you know, we could only take a handful of fans, then football would be rubbish. We're going to take a good amount of fans to Oxford. There's obviously the Wembley game was the last game we played. There'll be some players who played in that, some who haven't, and some who won't know what this derby means sometimes, you know. And believe me, the more and more games we've played against Oxford recently, I think the more the more this game has got spice to it. It's great, you know, it really is. There's no malice, there's nothing bad about it, and Oxford haters being probably classed as a rival because they think we're this smaller team down the road. But listen, we're really happy to be there, and we're really looking forward to competing and showing everyone the Wycombe that is growing out of Rob and Pete Curry's investments, you know, and I think the more people still keep us as this little team, the better for me, because I'm sure that a lot of teams underestimate us, but we're firing well. I'm really pleased where we are, and looking forward to Saturday.
Finally, Wycombe legend Glenn Creaser obviously had a cardiac arrest on Sunday. Luckily, everything seems to be good, and it is being talked about that he's leaving hospital at any time now. Have you got a message for him?
Well, I'll just reiterate the text message I sent him 2 days ago, which is, you've always been a fighter, Glenn, and this isn't going to beat you, I'll tell you that. I know you're going to be back stronger, and just to let him know that the Wycombe family's thinking about him. You know, he's a legend of Wycombe Wanderers, and you can't help feel we've lost a few in the last 2 years, a few absolute legends, you know, names that probably some of the younger fans won't know, not know what they did, who they were, but this club wouldn't be where it was for the likes of Glenn Creaser, and so the Wycombe boys and the Wycombe staff are thinking about you, mate, and get well soon.
Indeed, very well said, Gareth Ainsworth. That is it from the Wycombe Wanderers Show this week. Colin, fingers crossed, will be back next week. Wycombe, of course, playing Oxford United on Saturday, as Pete Couhig would say, up the Wick.